On Christmas Eve, my mom opened the handmade gift from my daughter and said, "I don't accept things from kids who aren't real family." My daughter just stared, didn't shed a single tear. But then my son stood up, and what he said next made both of my parents turn pale. On Christmas Eve, my mom looked my daughter dead in the eyes and said, "I don't accept things from kids who aren't real family." And she said it while holding the handmade ornament Ella spent 2 weeks crafting for her. A snowflake carved from wood, painted light blue, her name and the year written in silver on the back. Ella made it with glue-sticky fingers and way too much heart. She wrapped it herself, signed the tag, to Grandma. Everyone saw it. Everyone heard it. And no one said a word. My daughter didn't cry. She just stared at my mom like she didn't understand what had just happened. I think part of her really believed that maybe this year would be different. That maybe she'd finally be treated like she belonged. That's when Luke, my son, stood up. And what he said next made both of my parents go completely white. But I'll get to that. You need to know the lead up. You need to know why what he said hit so hard. It started the moment I told my parents I was pregnant with Ella. I already had Luke. I was divorced and trying to hold everything together. Ella's dad was a mistake I made during the loneliest time of my life. And when I told my parents I was keeping the baby, they made their position clear. You think we're going to play grandma and grandpa to that? From that day on, they treated her like she was something I should have hidden. They never called her their granddaughter. At holidays, she got whatever was cheapest and wrapped last minute. My dad once told me straight to my face, "It's not about hating her. It's about knowing what's ours and what's not." But I still kept showing up. Still let them be in our lives. Still tried to give my kids the illusion of family. Until that night. We were all sitting in their living room. My brother and his wife, their twins, my parents. Ella was nervous but excited. She had spent hours picking out the ribbon for that tiny box. When she handed it over, my mom opened it slowly, like she already knew it wouldn't be worth her time. She turned the ornament over once, twice. Then set it on the coffee table like it was used garbage. She looked right at Ella. And said it. "I don't accept things from kids who aren't real family." The silence after that felt nuclear. And that's when Luke stood up. 13 years old, taller than my brother already. Hands clenched into fists. And when he spoke, the entire room shifted. Because he didn't just defend his sister. He exposed everything. And that was the moment things started falling apart. Not for me. Not for my kids. For them. Luke stood up and didn't even look at me. His eyes locked on my parents. He said, "Then maybe you shouldn't accept anything from me either. Because if she's not family, neither am I." The room froze. My mom actually blinked like she didn't hear him right. My dad opened his mouth, then shut it again. My brother mumbled something about not starting drama at Christmas, but no one was listening to him. Luke turned to my daughter and took the ornament from the coffee table. He held it like it mattered, like it was worth more than anything under their overpriced tree, then handed it back to Ella and told her he'd put it on our tree when we got home. She didn't say anything, just nodded, eyes still wide. Then Luke looked around the room and said, "I don't want anything from people who treat my sister like trash. You don't deserve us." I don't know what stunned me more, that he said it out loud or how calm he was when he did. He's never been the type to cause a scene. But something broke in him that night. And once he said it, there was no taking it back. My dad stood up next, red in the face like he was about to tell Luke to watch his mouth. But Luke didn't flinch. He looked at my father like he wasn't scared of him anymore. And that's when I realized he wasn't. We'd spent years walking on eggshells around these people. Letting the insults slide. Smiling through the digs. Trying to keep the peace. And for what? So they could look down on us. So they could tell my daughter, a kind, sweet, creative little girl, that she didn't count? I finally stood up too. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From the weight of all the years I stayed quiet. I said we were leaving. My mother tried to backtrack. Said we were misunderstanding her words. That she didn't mean it like that. That she loves all her grandchildren. But she didn't say Ella's name. Not once. Luke picked up our coats without another word. My daughter held the ornament like it was glass, and we walked out the front door into the freezing night. We didn't say anything until we got in the car. Then Luke said, "You don't ever have to bring us there again. We don't need them." I didn't cry. I just started the car. 'Cause he was right. And what none of them realized, not yet, was that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They thought they'd pushed us out for good. But what was coming next? They'd never see it coming. 2 days after Christmas, a card showed up in our mailbox. Thick envelope, gold-trimmed edges, my mom's handwriting on the front. I opened it out of curiosity more than anything else. Inside was an invitation to a New Year's family brunch at their house. It was written like nothing had happened. No apology. No mention of Christmas Eve. Just a generic note. We'd love to see everyone together again to start the year off right. I didn't show it to Ella. She'd already asked twice why Grandma didn't like her gift. I didn't have the right answer and I wasn't about to pretend anymore. Luke saw the card though. He read it, rolled his eyes and tossed it into the trash. Then he said something that stuck with me. They're not inviting us. They're inviting the people they pretend we are. And he was right. They wanted the photo up. The clean slate illusion. They didn't care how much it cost to humiliate a 7-year-old as long as their table looked full and happy in pictures. So I decided to write them a response. Not a letter. Not a message. A plan. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. My mother's sister, Aunt Karen. We were never close, mostly because my mom always talked trash about her. Said she was manipulative, selfish, too blunt. But I remembered something from years ago. At my wedding, when my parents were busy trying to control everything, Aunt Karen had pulled me aside and said, "You ever need to get out from under them, you call me." So I did. And I told her everything. Not just about Christmas Eve. I told her about the years of comments, the way they treated Ella like an outsider, how they treated me like a screw-up for raising 2 kids without a man. I expected her to play neutral. But she didn't. She said, "You know what? It's about time someone exposed them." Apparently, I wasn't the only one they treated like garbage. Aunt Karen had kept her distance for a reason. But she was still part of the extended family and she knew people. Including the woman who handled the church bulletin. The same one my mom bragged about every week like it was her personal newspaper column. By the time New Year's Day rolled around, the bulletin had a new section. It was usually just birthdays and bake sales, but this time it included a note under the Family Spotlight section. Read, "A special shout out to young Luke and Ella for showing true grace and courage this Christmas. Your kindness, strength, and loyalty to each other set an example for everyone in our community." No last names. No drama. But it hit its mark. I got the first call 3 hours later. My mom. I let it ring. The second one came from my brother. Then my dad. Then silence for 2 days. Until the third day when my mom left a voicemail. "You're turning the family against us." I played it on speaker. Luke was doing homework. He looked up and said, "Good." But this wasn't about just turning the family against them. I wasn't finished. They thought I would disappear quietly, ashamed. They were about to learn what it felt like to be the ones unwelcome. A week after the brunch invitation, the fallout had already started. My mom stopped posting online, which for her was like not breathing. Her Facebook had always been filled with filtered photos of her grandkids, just the ones she liked of course, and long-winded posts about how blessed she felt to have such a close, loving family. The last one had gone up on Christmas morning. It was a blurry photo of my brother's kids holding matching gifts, captioned, "True Family, the heart of every holiday." Elle wasn't in it. Luke wasn't either. After the church bulletin went out, people noticed. A few of her friends commented things like, "What brave kids. You must be so proud, and didn't know you had a granddaughter named Ella. Beautiful name." She didn't reply to a single one. Instead, she started damage control. First, she called Luke's school and tried to donate money, anonymously, to the winter fundraiser. Luke's principal emailed me confused. Said she'd never seen a grandparent make a donation in someone else's name and then ask if their name would be announced during the assembly. I told her no thanks. Luke didn't need a donation. He needed an apology. Next, she sent a package to our house. A large box with no note, just 4 neatly wrapped presents inside. 2 for Luke, 2 for Ella. Expensive toys. Gift cards. Bribes. I asked Ella if she wanted to open hers. She looked at the box for a while, then shook her head and said, "Why would I want a present from someone who doesn't like me?" I returned the box. No message, no signature. Then came the final move. My parents showed up at Luke's basketball game. I didn't even notice them until halftime. They sat in the back row of the bleachers, my dad in his too big coat, my mom clutching a coffee cup she didn't drink from once. I could feel my jaw clench. Luke noticed too. He didn't acknowledge them. just kept playing like they weren't there. After the game, they approached us in the parking lot. My dad tried to smile. My mom looked exhausted, like the last 2 weeks had aged her. She started with the classic, "Can we talk?" I said no. He kept going. Said she wanted to explain. That we had misinterpreted her words. That she never meant to hurt Ella and that it just came out wrong. Luke didn't wait for me to respond. He said loud and clear, "You didn't say it wrong. You said what you meant. You just didn't like that everyone else finally heard it." My dad muttered something about respect, but Luke cut him off. "You don't get to teach me about respect. You had none for my sister." They both looked completely unprepared. Like they expected a few tears, maybe a dramatic hug, a neat little fix. Instead, they got a 13-year-old who'd watched them bully a child and decided he was done letting it slide. I told them we weren't interested in hearing excuses. Not then, not ever. That they needed to accept the reality they created. They made my daughter feel like a stranger in her own family, and that wasn't something we were going to just pretend didn't happen. Before they walked away, my mom said something low, almost under her breath. But I heard it. We didn't think she'd remember. That told me everything. They weren't sorry. They were just shocked the damage was permanent. But what they didn't know yet was that I wasn't done. They spent years treating me like the failure. Like I was the one with no stability, no backbone, no future. So I decided to show them exactly what I had built, without them. It started with the photos. I'd never been big on social media, but this time I posted something. Not for them, for me. For Ella. Luke. It was a picture of the three of us decorating our own little tree at home. The same handmade ornament Ella had made sat front and center, right under the star. Luke was hanging lights. Ella was holding up the snowflake, smiling the kind of smile that comes from knowing you're finally somewhere safe. The caption was simple. "Family isn't who claims you. It's who shows up for you. Every single time." I didn't tag anyone. Didn't name names. But it didn't matter. Within a day, the post had more comments than anything I'd ever uploaded. Old friends. People from high school. Even my cousin from Oregon who I hadn't talked to in years. Every message said the same thing: "We see what they did. And we see what you're doing. Your kids are lucky to have you." Word spread fast. Faster than I expected. And apparently it didn't sit well with my parents. They'd always relied on being the respected ones in the family. They controlled the narrative, that I was unstable, that my life was a mess, that Ella was my burden, not my daughter. They never thought anyone would question that. Till now. That week I got a call from a lawyer. Not mine, theirs. Turns out, a few years ago my parents had created a family trust. One of those legacy setups they like to brag about. My brother's kids were named in it. Luke was 2. Ella wasn't. No surprise there. But here's the twist. The lawyer, an older woman named Renee, said she'd been the trustee for over 10 years and had never met me. She asked if I had any questions about the distribution plan. I said I didn't care about the money. Then she said something strange. "It's rare that people your age don't contest exclusion. Especially when it's clearly personal." That stuck with me. So I asked her what would happen if I submitted evidence of consistent documented exclusion, not just from the trust but from family events, support, anything that showed deliberate targeting of one child over the other. She paused, then said, "If that evidence were public, it could be used to contest the intention of the trust, especially if one beneficiary, your son, was already aware and impacted by the same behavior." And that's when the idea fully clicked. I wasn't going after money. I was going after the truth. I sat down with Luke and told him what I'd learned. Asked if he wanted to speak to Renee too. He didn't even hesitate. Said he'd be happy to tell her everything they ever said about Ella. Every whispered comment, every ignored birthday, every look of disgust. He remembered it all. So we gave her everything. Not to take from them, but to take away their story. Their version of who we were. And then I sent one final message to my parents. I told them what I'd done. That I'd submitted records. That their trustee now had our side of the story. And that whatever happened next, they deserved it. A week later, I got a single envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of my parents' fireplace, where they usually hung all the grandkids' stockings. Only 3 were up this year. My brother's twins and Luke's. Ella's was missing. But this time so was mine. They thought they were sending a message. They didn't realize they'd already lost. Because they didn't just cut us out. They proved to everyone else what we already knew. They were never our family to begin with. By mid-February, the silence from my parents turned into something else. Desperation. First it came through my brother. He called me out of nowhere, started the conversation like nothing had happened. Talked about how cold the weather was, how busy things had been. Then slipped in a line like he hadn't rehearsed it 5 times. You know, Mom and Dad, they've been really down lately. This whole thing, it's taken a toll. They didn't expect you'd go nuclear. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit the way they used to let Ella sit alone at the kids' table. He kept going. They say they're willing to talk. To make things right. I asked him something simple. Do they even know what they're apologizing for? He paused. Too long. And that was my answer. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry it stopped working. 2 weeks later, the church held their annual Founders Banquet. A big community event where my dad always gave a speech and my mom stood in the front row like royalty. Every year they'd invite most of the family to clap along, and every year I'd politely decline. This time I didn't get an invitation. But I got a call from Aunt Karen the day after. She went. Not to support them, to see what would happen. He told me the room felt thinner this year. Fewer people. Awkward energy. When my dad stepped up to the podium, a third of the room barely looked up from their plates. No applause. No nods of admiration. Just silence. When he made a joke about keeping families strong, someone near the front scoffed loud enough to be heard. After the speech, Karen said, people didn't line up to shake their hands. No photos. No compliments. Just a lot of people looking at their phones or slipping out early. Later that week, my mom tried to call again. I didn't answer. Neither did Luke. She tried one more time. This time she left a message. She said she wanted to meet Ella. Really meet her. We think it's time. But here's the thing. It was always time. When she was born. When she took her first steps. When she learned to read, when she cried over math homework, when she made that ornament and gave it away believing it would be treasured. They had chances. Hundreds. They didn't just miss them. They chose not to take them. No. Now the house feels warmer. Our dinners feel lighter. Luke laughs more. Ella doesn't ask about grandma anymore. She's too busy making new art projects, teaching herself how to knit from YouTube, drawing family trees with just the 3 of us at the top. And she's happy. Not because we cut people out, but because we finally stopped pretending people like that belonged in our lives. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. But I'll admit, watching them stand on their perfect little stage with no one left to clap, that was nice too.